Well, hello everybody, and welcome to my new episode of Tea with Louise. I've got my friend Jennifer with me, and Jennifer, I can never remember how to say your last name. Seek?
Seek, S-I-E-C-K.
Yeah, I know how to spell it, but I was like, suddenly I was like, do I know how to pronounce it properly?
Yeah,
Anyway.
like hide and go seek.
We've been friends for a long time on Facebook, and we've chatted a couple of times offline. And we were messaging the other night, and we decided to have tea together and just talk over some of the bigger themes that we're seeing kind of going on in the world lately, because we're both very kind of politically oriented beasts, and we're both in kind of the world of the spiritual as well to a degree. So Jennifer, I'd love if you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, you know, what you do, where you kind of come from, what your work involves.
Sure. So I have my master's in counseling from a school called Pacifica Graduate Institute, which is a school that focuses on Jungian psychology, so archetypal psychology, the idea that the soul and the psyche overlap and kind of inform each other. And so I offer services to people like intuitive counseling, like chakra balancing work, like intuitive tarot card readings, and classes, things like that, to help people get in touch with their intuition, because I really feel like that's something that we're missing right now in this very speedy, very kind of top-down culture. In many ways, we're missing that connection with our own inner sense of what's right and what's true.
And you can see that this is why Jennifer and I get along, because this is kind of my, I don't have a master's in counseling, but the astrology that I practice is based on Jungian principles to a great degree. And so I've studied that in depth, and my approach to astrology through my classes and membership or readings, whatever I do, is people really getting in touch with their inner voice and their inner creativity, and really embodying and accepting who they are, not trying to attain some kind of mythical ascension and so on and so forth. So
it's a good way of putting it, mythical ascension. I like that.
I'm not a big fan of the whole ascension language. I'm a big fan of trying to be the best person we can be.
Yeah.
Whilst accepting who we are deeply inside, and creating from that inner space. So
yeah,
and descending into our humanity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So kind of let's get this wrapping. I think Jennifer and I kind of wanted to really look at the overarching themes of what we see kind of going on. It's a big subject, so we're not going to cover everything. But we did start with a conversation about the trial that's on everybody's lips. If you're listening later to that, there's just been the Depp Heard trial, of a defamation trial. We're not going to get into, who's right, who's wrong. We're not analysing the people. We want to look at the bigger picture of these things. We've also realised that the Brangelina, divorce custody circus thing is also going to be televised, and so is the Marilyn Manson. What was her name again? Sorry, I can't.
Evan Rachel Wood.
Evan Rachel Wood, slipped my mind. Case is also going to be televised. We're also, recording this on the day that the Senate hearings are going to be televised as well, and so it's kind of more about what's going on in the public space that we're kind of concerned about, really. And I see it in the astrology. I see all these polarities being emphasized by this public circus, and who's funding it, and who's paying it, and who's benefiting of it. So yeah, Jennifer, dive in and just let's just see where this goes.
It just warms my heart to hear you say that. A couple months ago, I was trying to get a podcast together with a friend, and it didn't happen, but like this tendency to kind of black and white everything, right? Like the Democrats are good, the Republicans are bad. It really doesn't allow us to get to the inner strength of any opposite, right? So we're always just fighting that opposite polarity. And I think it is something that happens in postmodern culture when people are overwhelmed, but I also think it happened as a result to the Trump situation, right? Because everybody felt so unsafe. And when people are in a survival situation, it's easier to point at the other side and say the problem is there than to look inside and figure out, like, how is this asking me to change my life? What is this asking of me? This whole dynamic. How can I be a better person? How can we come back to find community with each other? It's easier to just say, well, if the Republicans weren't doing this, or the Democrats weren't doing this, or whatever group, and then to also kind of, I loved what did you say? You said, I can't remember the term. It was wonderful. It was kind of like grandiosity. It was something about, it was two words. You said it just a little bit ago. There's a tendency, though, to get grandiose and to create these, kind of groups where everybody is so evolved that nothing touches us and we don't have to feel our connection with our humanity, right? Like the shadow parts of ourselves, which also make us up.
Or was it my thing about ascension? I can't even remember the word I used.
It was a great term. I know. It's like, write that one down.
I need to go back and listen again to come to it.
Right. I get it.
Oh, mythical
ascension. It was great. Yeah, because I think that's what everybody's trying to do. They're trying to escape their humanity. They're trying to suggest that somehow we all are supposed to rise above that situation. And that isn't where the juice is, or where the love is, or where the vulnerability is.
And it involves spiritual bypassing and all kinds of those tools that we're doing it. And this is not trying to point fingers at anybody who's listening. It's just to encourage you to really listen to your inner voice, and to start to question what you're being fed, what you're taking in all the time, and question, my Gemini moon. I'm lucky really that I've got a Gemini moon, I think, because it's always questioning, and I'm always analyzing what am I being fed, what information am I being told, and I can change my mind 20 times a day because of it. So and I think that's a good thing, because I'm kind of I'm open, and it means I'm sorry, go on. Go on.
I think too, it's harder to do it because we're inside of this fishbowl, right? So it becomes harder to see, like, this really isn't an alternative way of looking at this. This is the way the masses look at it. This is just a bigger group that looks at it this way. Because it seems to me like the Democratic Party back in the day was very much about the individual, right? And that kind of energy is kind of gone now. It's like we're supposed to just align with this group think. And and on the other side too, the Republican side too, this group think is kind of dominating all of these different groups. And really, the individual coming up with their own conclusions through more complex, rigorous thinking doesn't happen in the public arena very often.
It's not at all. It's kind of it's a little bit frightening, and
very frightening.
and where the money's coming from too. Both sides are feeding these things, and
absolutely.
Who's funding our elected leaders, and whose voices they're actually listening to, and then who are we listening to? Because again, I don't want to. Again, this is not an invitation to discuss the jury's decision in the Depp Heard trial, but it's a fact that Ben Shapiro, who is a very alt-right person, was funding thousands into some of these TikTok videos and ads that were running while you were kind of seeing things on social media and you know, on television as well, the ads that were in the middle of what you were watching. We're being manipulated to the extreme, and I think we're allowing ourselves to be manipulated by it. And you know, I'm not saying I you know, totally immune to manipulation. I think we're all being kind of collectively gaslighted in some ways, either consciously or unconsciously. You know, would you?
Well, and I think too, it has a lot to do with money, right? It's very, very hard right now to get an alternative candidate to be able to be elected because there's so much money pouring in from in the political parties to support candidates that align with a particular position. And it happens on both the right and the left. And it really breaks down the kind of, I mean, like Fetterman just won in Pennsylvania. That was super, super exciting because he doesn't play the game of I'm a Democrat, or he just says, I live in this community and everybody needs to have a voice in this community. And I speak for this community. And so, but it's harder and harder for someone outside of the political mainstream to have a campaign and get elected and, you know, do the whole thing. And I think that's happening in a lot because there's so much money behind all of these different things that people just can't get a foothold, you know, and nobody's talking about that.
Nobody. Well, very few people. I've been calling for publicly funded elections for a long time. But because, you know, I'm from the UK, where we don't have, I'm not saying there's no problems politically over there as well. The opposition, the polarities are showing up over there as well. But at least in the political arena, the actual election is like a short cycle. It's like 6 weeks, and it's like, you know, it's not got all these millions of dollars, or at least it didn't have. I think it's happening more actually now that money's coming in. But this is not just about politics as well. This is about the gender wars. This is everything.
Absolutely.
You know, beyond the judgment in that case, we're going to see the bit between Manson and Evan. And then we're going to see it with Brangelina as well, this gender war fighting. And it's being manipulated, this big backlash against the Me Too movement. I saw an excellent TikTok video. And if I remember, I'll find it and share it in the show notes if anybody wants to watch it. This wonderful Black woman said, you know, she totally believes the verdict. So let's say that. But she was like, so men, why are you not like the Me Too movement? When the women all came out in the Me Too movement, they kind of joined together and supported each other for the most part. Whereas the men have just turned it into attack on women instead of coming together and supporting each other. They've gone, you see, women can be abusers too. And so women are all that's evil again. And that's how we've been manipulated in that, with this televisation of the whole thing. It doesn't matter who initiated it or everything or anything. It's how it's been used, I think, in our collective psyche.
Well, and it's really a show. I mean, and also just the byproduct of it is that there's all this stuff on YouTube that isn't well documented, that is just little sound bites of what anybody wants to run with. And it isn't well documented, it isn't well researched, and it isn't true. Like a lot of these body language specialist people, like I saw one the other day, and she used her own definition of what happens when someone is traumatized to talk about every trauma victim. And I was like, well, so you're the person who decides for everyone what causes a trauma, how someone acts in a traumatic situation. I mean, that's not scientific. That, you know, you're just pointing back to yourself. So And we know that in traumatic situations, people respond in a myriad of different ways. There isn't one right way, but we're being fed this idea that there is somehow, and that and refed it again.
Yeah.
By the
I know.
algorithms.
So I think we've kind of ranted quite a lot about the issue, about how we're being publicly manipulated, and you know, by social media, the media, by everything we read, by these videos, by TikTok. I think, I'm sorry, I know I'm quoting a TikTok video, but somebody sent somebody sent that one to me as a good one, and it was a good one. But generally, I find TikTok quite a horrendous social media, so quite honestly.
Yeah, I went on it, and then I just went off of it pretty quickly. I couldn't figure out what to do there, what the point was. I might make another go round, but
I only watch. I really only watch TikTok if somebody sends me one that they say, hey, this somebody I trust, and they say this one's really good, and I'll go, okay, I'll watch it then, even though it's TikTok. But yeah. But you know, and then with social media, we have to remember we've got all those algorithms and things as well. That, you know, But one thing I'd love to switch to, really, seeing as, you know, the focus of our work and things, you know, I'd love to talk about how people can help themselves to really tune into their intuition and not be manipulated by all this external gumph and things. Because really, you know, even our vote really doesn't make much difference these days, to be quite honest. And I'm not a fan of voter suppression, but you know, the districts and things have been so manipulated, and the money and things.
Gerrymandered.
We, you know, I always vote, but but I kind of vote thinking, well, it's not going to make much difference, and it really doesn't.
Sad.
So to my mind, and I've talked about this a lot with my membership community, who I talk to quite a lot. The answer to my mind, and I see it in the astrology, is to really get tuned into embodiment and really tuned into your inner voice, and then connect at a deeper level in a smaller community, and then let that community build up and all support each other. Would you say that's kind of the answer as an individual?
Absolutely. I just told a client this yesterday. You know, I think sometimes in the morning we can get really, really overwhelmed because, you know, you go on your phone and there's all this information there, and it's just what you attach to from the dream realm, right? And so it can have you really amped up early in the morning. I was in the kitchen and I was like kind of messing around trying to figure out what to do. And I was like, just go inside. Just ask yourself, what do I need to do for me? And I think it's that Taurus and Uranus energy, right? Break it down to the smallest component parts. Ask the simplest questions, and make sure that you feel embodied, the word you're using, you know, as you're making those decisions for yourself. And then make sure that you're surrounding yourself by other people who are doing the same thing, right? So then you have a barometer for truth that is more resilient, allows for more different ideas, but is still grounded, right? In something that feels community oriented, something that feels like it's connected to the earth.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've actually switched. I don't look at my phone first thing anymore. I've always done it. But I'm running the Artist Way class at the moment, just for a group of people, and it's quite a large group of people. I was amazed how many people kind of showed up. And for those that don't know what the Artist Way is, it's one of the basic tools is what is called morning pages, 3 pages of stream of consciousness, longhand blurt on the page. First thing in the morning, before you're really awake, and before you look at your phone, and before you let all that outside influence come in. That's one of the tools I use. My walks are another tool I use, you know, just really getting into my body and noticing the world around and things, and you know, seeing that the whole world isn't horrible, really. Things are, there is good in there. And of course, there's lots of practices, restorative practices. You probably use some of those. Yeah.
Yeah, I use a lot of chakra balancing meditation
Yeah.
practices. I do a lot of animal
Yeah.
totem work. I'm really into animal totem work. So just
Yeah.
connecting with different animals that I have relationships with around the house, the squirrels, and I have a bunny and a cat, but also more, you know, animals all over, like connecting my chakras with those animal energies and figuring out, you know, what the gifts of those energies are. And then you can kind of experience this subtle shift where you get reconnected with the earth and reconnected with nature.
And I think it's really important to find practices or guides or whatever you want to call it, who encourage you to remember that everything, not just we, or everything is interconnected. Everything,
Absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely.
There is no black and white, you know. There is no kind of other than this, you know. There's
That's right.
Even science is proving this now, right?
With the mirror neurons and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, we're connected to the leaf. We're connected to each other, you know. So there's, you know, I'm really uncomfortable with a lot of the, and we were talking a little bit, there's a lot of this cult-like kind of energy out there of, you know, attaching yourself to a cult leader who says you are sovereign beings and, you know, everything you do is up to you. You're completely autonomous. Nothing.
Well, it doesn't take into consideration any power dynamics that people have lived with, you know. I mean, poverty and loss, different kinds of things like that. Those are endemic. They're systemic. Yes. They carry on through generations, and they have an energy to them. And when you just say everybody's on the same playing field and every single thing that you do, you're totally responsible for, you're not looking at any intergenerational dynamics or any ancestral energies, right? Because there's a shadow part to those too, and we have a responsibility to each other to help everybody raise up and help everybody connect and feel capable.
There's an excellent book I've just listened to. You might enjoy it, actually, Jennifer, and I should have mentioned it to you before. And I'd love to, I think I've recommended it on the podcast once, so I'd love to recommend it again. And I actually went on one of these call series, and I don't know what called me to it. And this was the only call I listened to. Okay. And this woman, I've started following her now on social media. Her name's Shelley Tijelski. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. And her book is Sit Down to Rise Up. And she started a movement. Sit Down to Rise Up. Name. Yeah, I know. She powerful. She's got such a powerful story as well herself. She developed a condition and woke up one morning literally blind. But she's restored her sight through treatment, but it's a degenerative condition, so she might be blind permanently one day. But anyway, she started a movement at the start of the pandemic called Pandemic of Love. And her book says how radical self-care can change the world. So I think that's kind of at the nub of what we're talking about here. It's kind of getting in touch with yourself. It's loving yourself, caring for yourself so that you feel your cup's filled, literally. You're kind of doing mindfulness practices and so on and so forth, so that you can actually help others. Then you can only truly help others from a truly full cup, and that's emotionally, spiritually, and physically, and everything. Not
Absolutely. No, I agree. And I think too, the things that move us away from that energy are not slowing down enough, not tuning in enough, feeling the pressure from the culture to keep up, that sort of thing, pulls us away from center. And we have to check back in often, which is that self-care stuff I'm talking about.
Yeah. So, I'd encourage people, I can understand the fascination of watching things like the Depp Heard trial. I didn't watch it personally because, A, I didn't have the time. And B, I saw all these TikTok videos and things and thought, oh dear, people are being kind of like, played here a little bit by the media to a degree. And anyway, I'll be watching the Senate hearings because I'm a political beast and I want to hear them. But I think the balance must be, if you watch things like that, do the self-care practices too, so it's not just invading your spirit.
Absolutely. I love that title, Sit Down to Rise Up, because it really embodies the Taurus and Uranus energy that we're all being asked to connect with, right? Which is that slow down, connect with everything. And then the ascension piece, you're connected to the earth, the ascension piece isn't awful if you're connected to the earth and you realize that you're human, because that's that shadow part, and reclaiming it as opposed to devaluing it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that this is the total lesson of Uranus in Taurus for a start, and the North Node in Taurus, and the eclipses that we're going, because the eclipses are always where the nodes are for the non-astrologers amongst you. And the North Node in Taurus is where we're being pulled to till about May 2023. All the eclipses will be in those signs. Not that it's not an ongoing thing, but it's a real emphasis right now. And so that's what we're being asked to focus on. So yeah, I think this conversation's been amazing. So yeah, I think Jennifer and I are asking people to sit down and rise up, because I think, we were just chatting on Messenger, and both of us are a little bit upset by kind of what we've been seeing happen in the world, and understandably, and we're limited to what we can, as I said, to what we can do politically. I'm not suggesting don't vote, but it starts locally. Maybe start with yourself, then maybe start a circle of mutual aid. Her Pandemic of Love, this book is based on mutual aid, and it's awesome. A real, what can you actually do to support others in a real meaningful way when you are in a good place? And how can you ask for help from others too? That's another one.
Absolutely. That's a big piece of it too, for sure. Is and that that whole ascension dynamic, when we're just sovereign to ourselves, only responsible for ourselves, really misses that part about asking for help and realizing that people do have patterns that they're working through, and that they can learn from each other's stories, and they can learn from each other's experiences. And if they discount all of these things because they're these sovereign beings who have nothing to learn, or who are pushing away from the shadow, from anything that's painful or edgy or whatever, they miss that whole deeper level and capacity for compassion, I think, which really happens in communities that really are kind of cultish, if you will.
Yeah. And I don't know if you listen at all to the Conspirituality podcast.
I have.
Yeah. I don't always love everything they do. I don't love everything anybody does. But they've done a good job of dismantling some of the cult-like communities, because they have come from that background themselves, the presenters, particularly one of them. I can't remember which one it was. He was in two cults and managed to kind of decultify himself for the most part, although I think the mind control can be so strong that you know, he admits himself that it still comes back, the conditioning at times.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think too that is really going to be our next big thing. I mean, maybe it sounds, you know, far reaching, but I think it may be our next big thing that we have to tackle as a global community, is this tendency to, you know, cordon ourselves off into little groups that are all the same in some way.
Yeah. And to expect somebody else to fix it for you. That's another one.
Absolutely.
Oh,
yes.
my goodness. Giving your power away and saying, oh, you know.
Yes. And to disavow anything that's dark or uncomfortable, you know, because our strength is in moving through that darkness and finding the light, not through, you know, disavowing the darkness. Anybody who's done any inner work knows that that's not the way it works.
And nobody can do that for you. Some people can.
Absolutely.
Some people can support you through it. That's for sure. You can get community that can support you through it, and that's where the asking for help comes. But you know, if I think I'd be wary of anybody who says, you know, well, you know, I have all the answers. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I give you all the answers.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, so is there anywhere else we'd like to go with this, Jennifer? We kind of decided
covered a lot.
We have covered an awful lot. And I know, to my regular listeners, I know we've talked about the astrology a little, but you know, I think I'm going to have more conversations like this on my podcast, because it's just that as they're going to come up, I think, with the right people to talk about it, and to dismantle some of this stuff that we're being fed in our community, and that it's, well, not just in our community, in all our communities, that we're not involved in the world. And that, you know, one thing that worries me with, to be completely transparent, Jennifer and I were both Bernie Sanders supporters. I was a national delegate for him in 2016, and I
went to Philly.
Yeah, we were both in Philly.
You were in Philly too. That's awesome.
Yes, I was there as a national delegate. So yeah,
that's awesome.
And what's kind of distresses me, as a lot of people I was connected with from that time have kind of gone to this more libertarian, every man for themselves route, and it's quite depressing, because the central message was that we're all in this together, and now they're going, well, you know, voting's no use, so I won't vote anymore, or you know, or they're voting for every man for themselves, pull yourselves up by the bootstraps kind of energy, and there's been a move to that generally, and it's really kind of upsetting to me, to be quite honest.
I think there's that, and I also think there's the tendency to just not look at anything very deeply, just look at it on the surface and say, oh, you know, we have this policy, or we got Biden through, and so we're just happy with everything he does, and there's no critiquing. I think it's a larger problem in the culture, that there's no ability to hold the space for critique. It seems like that was what was so important back when I was in school, was that you could critique something and you could figure out, like, does this hold water? Where does it? Where doesn't it? Where is the better argument? And still be loving and be supportive and be kind and have good ideas, you know, have well wishes. But now there's almost something where if you're critiquing something, people just want to stay right on the surface, you know, and just be happy with exactly what's there. And it almost feels like we're just stuck in a loop or something. We're not digging into something deeper or more rich, or, you know, and then you can't really transmute any energy. You can't really change anything if you just stay right there on the surface. Do you know?
Oh yeah, it's true. And that's part of this is good, this is bad thing again.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Yeah. Or maybe I won't see what is good or bad. Maybe I'll just stay on the surface and just not really contribute my opinion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah, there's that too. Yeah, yeah. I can't remember how many times people tried to shut me down for any little critique of Biden, or
Yeah,
or whatever,
yeah.
because
Well, I
Trump's so
mean,
bad,
right, exactly. And the only way that things get stronger is if people, are like, oh, well, you're critiquing that. Well, there are some issues there, but we have to look at where we came from, and you have to dig
Yeah,
deeper to get into that
exactly.
stuff to
Yeah,
change and grow. Otherwise, you
it's
don't.
kind of it's kind of not about the individuals. It's about the whole, how we got to it, the systems and everything. So
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I know too that I remember when we were talking before that we were using the term gaslighting, and I don't think that's something
Mhm.
that we've brought up, but I
No, I
think
don't
that's
think it
happening
was.
on both sides, right? I
Oh,
think it's the byproduct of being in pain. I think as a collective culture, we've experienced a lot of pain that we're not slowing down and
mhm.
recognizing. We're just kind of bulldozing through, right? Like Trump's gone now, everything's going to be fine, right? Even though,
Oh, damn,
he
everything's not
changed
fine
things, right?
suddenly. Oh my
He
God.
changed
Oh my
the
God,
way government
inflation. Oh my
works,
God.
right? Right. So,
and
yeah. So I
and
think,
and this rush to get back to normal, whatever normal is.
yes,
And
whatever that
yes,
is, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
There ever was one anyway. What is that even? I don't even know. Isn't that something we collectively
I know.
decide? I don't know.
Well, oh, and what's normal for me might not be normal for somebody else anyway.
Exactly. That's
No,
true too. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I have to tell you something. I actually really, not obviously not the death and the pain people were going through, but the silence, the quiet, and the clean skies in the early days of the pandemic. I was like, I kind of like this.
Absolutely, for sure. And the animals started getting more,
Yes,
more amplified. I noticed,
yeah.
they liked it a
So
lot.
so so it's good to reflect on all of it, not just on, yeah, yeah. Anyway, anything else we want to cover? I think
I don't know.
I
Anything
think
you
it's
want to
been
cover?
great. No,
Yeah,
I think it's been a really helpful conversation. And if we go on too long, people drop off anyway. So how can
fine.
people
Yeah.
how can people find you, Jennifer?
Oh, sure. You can find me at Inner Voice Intuitive on YouTube. You can find me on my website at Inner Voice Intuitive, and you can find me on Facebook at Inner Voice Intuitive.
Cool. And I'm
Those are
going to
the
post the
places.
links. I will
Awesome.
post the links in the show note, but not everybody looks that far down, so it's good to say
Yeah,
where as well. And as usual,
absolutely.
I'm Cosmic Owl Astrology everywhere, YouTube, as well. Yeah, most places, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook mainly. And if you would subscribe to my channel while you're here, or leave me a review on iTunes, that would be very helpful. And I'll share this recording, of course, with Jennifer so she can share it if she chooses to too. And I hope
So
you've enjoyed the conversation, and I actually hope everybody will go and read that book, Sit Down to Rise Up, because
I'm definitely going to look it up.
it's very inspiring. And a group of friends and I here in Utah are going to start a local group of the pandemic in love, of love, I think,
That's awesome.
to try and help others. So maybe
Very
other
cool.
people will do it in their states too. So, well, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for coming and
Absolutely. Thank you.
see you in space.